How's everybody doing today? Pete here with Spawn Fly Fish, and as you can see, I'm holding a little rainbow trout imitation here. I'm not sure what to call it yet, but it's a fun little streamer. So we're going to tie this up today. Hopefully you enjoy it. I know I have fun tying this. It's a fish catcher, or what we like to call fish magnet. But aside from that, this thing has movement, it's pretty, and it produces. So I think we should put this in your arsenal as well. So get ready to tie along, and if you enjoy this video, much like we've asked you before, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and go ahead and click that notification button, so anytime we put out a new video, you will be notified that it's up and ready. Thanks so much for watching. Alright, so before we get too far here, the hook that we're going to use for the back portion of this fly is the X0774 from Ahrex, and this is a size 6. And it's pretty nice as a trailer hook. Our front hook is going to be a different style, and it'll be a size 2. So as far as progressing from the forward portion to the back, you do want a somewhat smaller hook as a trailer. The nice thing about this is it's going to stay free from our other materials and have some extra movement as well. For our thread, we're going to be using some 6/0 olive uni thread. And let's just go ahead and get this started here. Awesome. Trim your tag end of thread, and we're good to go. The first thing we're going to add is a little bit of flash, and for this I'm going to use some Krystal Flash Silver, and I'm going to start with 3 pieces. I'll try to keep some of this in the camera here. So we've got 3 pieces of flash, and I'm going to double that over itself and then cut it again so that we're starting with 6 pieces of flash. And the way I'm going to tie this in is to fold it over itself, but over the thread as well. So like so, and when you bring this up to the hook and tie it onto the shank now, work that down to just past where the flat portion is of the shank, and ta-da, you have 12 strands of flash that are going to stick out as a little bit of a tail. And again, we're tying a rainbow trout, a baby trout. So you've noticed, we're going to add some pink in here, but that's as a trigger. There's not going to be a lot of pink, of course, in a small baby rainbow trout, but there is plenty of silver. So for our next little piece of adornment, we're going to add natural Mallard flank feather, and this is from Hareline. I'm just going to trim out the tip like so. Now I'm going to get rid of just some of the fibers on both sides of the quill like that. That's what we're going to use as our little tie-in spot. And tie this all the way back to where that last thread wraps are of where we tied in our tail, our flash. And don't need a lot of wraps here, just a few, because what we're adding is that mottled, barred, break up the monotony of the pattern kind of deal. So it doesn't have to be exactly beautiful or X number of wraps. We just want a general spotted effect, if you will. There we go. And that looks pretty good right there. And I'm going to turn this over and I'll finish it off on the bottom. Get rid of as many of those little fibers as you can that are loose, and keep that quill a little bit cleaner before you try tying it off, and make things a little easier for you. There we go. All right. So get a couple wraps of thread right there in that V that we created. And once you put a couple wraps in front and then come back and 2 more wraps in that V, and once you've cut this quill, there's nowhere for it to slip out anymore. So you can get right next to it. I'm just going to comb a couple fibers out and all the way around the hook shank. Perfect. Come back down, tie that down, and we're ready for our next element. And that is going to be some Krystal Flash Chenille in pearl. I'm just going to take a few of the fibers off of the end there, and you can see I exposed the core, and that's what we're going to use to tie it in. Wrap down and back 2 different times, and you got to leave yourself just a little bit of room before the hook eye here, so you're going to add some Marabou. But the nice thing with this Krystal Flash Chenille is it's pretty soft, and you can tie it down as much as you need to. That looks good right there. And again, a couple wraps to tie it down, a couple wraps in the front, and a couple more wraps where we started. And again, just like with the quill of that feather, there's nowhere for this to go but to stay on the hook shank. All right. And now I'm going to use my offhand and brush those fibers back, get some thread right here behind that hook eye, and we're ready as a little platform, if you will, for our Marabou to sit. For the Marabou, I've got Nature Spirit Spey Marabou. I'm going to use the UV white for the bottom portion of the fly or underbelly, and then I'm going to use some medium olive for the top. And I'd say about a 3/4 inch section of fibers here. We'll peel those off the quill. And let's get our underside tied in here. Now you can use the Mallard feather as your measurement for how long this tail should be. So I'm going to just kind of match my Marabou roughly with where the Mallard flank fibers end. And a couple loose wraps here, 3. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure that these fibers are coming up to the halfway point of the shank. So the bottom portion of the hook shank is going to have all the white fibers, and then on top will be our olive. But you want to make sure that those are staying where they're supposed to, on not creeping up onto the top portion of the fly. Once you've got those where you're happy, go ahead and clip out those butt ends like so. A couple more thread wraps to really solidify that, and you're ready to tie in the olive on top. And so here we've got our olive. And again, it's not going to take a whole lot, especially for this rear hook. As we get to the front hook, it's a little bit bigger. It's going to have a longer distance to cover from not only the connection, but also onto the rear hook section. All right, this is great Marabou. If you've never used Nature Spirit, you make a really quality product. Okay, so we're just going to line this up to sit where our white feather was underneath. Again, a couple loose wraps. And now we'll move this around, and I want you to see right where these meet up with those white fibers on that side, your side of the hook, and I'll do the same on my side of the hook. And it's a gentle, gentle tug. You don't want to start pulling these fibers, and avoid going with or against the shank, I guess, if you will. And they, then you don't have to worry about them slipping on you. And once you got those where you want them, a couple wraps in front. Let those butts come forward again, and we'll get a couple more wraps in between the fibers we want to keep and those that we're going to discard, like so. Cut these out. Trim up any little bits you can get your scissors on there, and we're ready to tie this off with a little bit of a neater thread head, if you will. And now we can whip finish. 2 whip finishes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 wraps for the first one. And we'll repeat it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And there we've got our rear portion, or tail, if you will. I'm just gonna slick a little bit of hard head on here from Loon, and we'll start working on the front portion and get this fly going. This is a great little bow imitation. Of course, other rainbows will eat little rainbows, brown trout, anything that's gonna feast on little rainbow trout will be chasing this fly down pretty quickly. All right, looks good so far. And as that's drying a little bit, let's get that out of there. Now for the front hook, we're going to use the Ahrex TP610. And this is a size 2. And as you can see, I've already got a bead on there. These are the Mottled tactical tungsten bead from Hareline. And this is pink, and the size is 7/32 inch. And for some weight and to secure that bead, I'm going to use some .025 non-lead wire. I'm going to give about 12 wraps, maybe 10. All this is going to do is give me a little weight, and then I'm going to slide this into the cavity of that bead, and we don't have to worry about it moving on us. Like so, solidified. Come in with your rounded, dedicated wire cutting scissors and just round that cut piece over until it's not going to rip your thread as soon as you start to tie. All right, so now start your thread again. Let's get behind that wire. And once we come up to the wire, trim that tag end of thread. And now try not to go directly in between these threads or the wire wraps. So let's get an angle, 45-degree forward and the same back. We'll do it again and then back. And now when we come through, we can get into getting in between each wire wrap with that thread. And this will really cinch it down and prevent any of these underbody portions from moving on you. All right, there we go. Work our thread back down a little. Now we're gonna add our connecting material. There are so many different ways you can connect two hooks. You can use shanks, you can use wire connections. For this one, we're gonna use some easy braid, and this is 30-pound test. And I've probably got, a 6-inch section. I've folded it over. I'm gonna tie in the cut ends on top, and I do mean directly on top of that hook shank. I don't want any part of this on either side. I just want it on top. I'm not gonna worry about these tag ends just yet. I will tie that down in a minute. Once this is solidly tied in, now the fun begins. So what we're gonna use to not only trigger the visual aspect for the strike from the fish, we're going to add some noise with this technique. So what I've got here are some 3D beads in Fuchsia, and I'm going to slip 2 of those onto our little connecting easy braid here. There's one. I've got one more to go. And now we'll add the second bead, and you can see these don't have a real big opening, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. All right, so now that we've got 2 beads on here, as this is moving in the water, these beads will slide up and down just a touch and give a little click-clack sound and send vibration through the water, all the kinds of stuff that fish just love. All right, so now we have our tail section. We're gonna come from the bottom and up through the top with our easy braid. Make sure it doesn't spin too much on us there. We don't want that to twist. And now we're gonna come back through both of those beads, in theory. There we got one. And this part's not always very easy, but a little patience and it will slick through. There we go. And now continue to pull that, and you don't want to get this pulled all the way so that the hook is touching the beads or anything like that. You do need a little bit of movement here, at least the equivalent of one more bead between the end of your forward hook and where the beads are. Once you've got that where you like it, keep that easy braid right on top, exactly on top of where you had it when we tied it in. It's slipping just a touch there. There we go. Continue down where our previous thread wraps are and then come forward. So now, where that braid was doubled over, we're going to take our scissors and cut it and keep far side on the far side and the near side on the near side. And the reason being, we're going to pull both those pieces back and tie them down. And now none of that can move. Can't slip forward, can't slip backwards. And you could easily throw some glue or cement on that too and make it just a little stronger, but for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and just keep tying. All right, and now we're gonna have plenty of movement off of that, that's for sure. All right, so now that we are here, what we don't want to see is what makes the connection. We want to kind of cover that a little bit, make it flow with the rest of the fly. Something to think about as you're designing new flies or working on your streamer game, flow, right? We want taper to go from front to back. So it makes sense that all these little pieces have to kind of mimic each other to go along. So again, we're going to take a mallard flank feather. I'm going to get the tip. Bring these fibers down, expose that part like so. These are too short for us to use. So right there, we'll make a cut and trim down the sides. All right. Bring our thread back a little and tie that in so that as we start wrapping, we'll be just about at the business point of our quill there. All right. Get these fibers moved back gently, and then as you begin to wrap, they will automatically flow toward the rear of the hook. And that is exactly what we want. A couple wraps, maybe a third. Yeah, I like that. All right, and again, swipe these out of your way, and as you come up, you see now you've exposed the clean section of quill. Tie right like so. A couple wraps in that V, and a couple wraps in front, a couple more in the V, and that quill is moving nowhere. There we go. What might look daunting at first is pretty simple actually once you get into tying it. Little comb action, get those fibers all the way around the hook shank. Love it. So now let's go back to our chenille. We're going to remove some of those fibers at the end, expose the core, tie the core down. And now we're going to wrap forward. Now, before you get all the way to the hook, the bead here, remember we are going to add one more mallard feather and then 2 little chunks of marabou. So you don't want to crowd this. Nice thing is, if you do, all these materials are pretty malleable, so you can kind of get by with it a little bit, but let's not push it. All right, a couple wraps in the front. Bring that back, and this V that we keep discussing here, get that thread right in those little V's that you make with your material. And you want to talk about strong, that's about as good as it gets. All right. And these little excess fibers, we're just going to tie these down anyway. So right about here looks like a good spot for, you guessed it, another mallard feather. If you don't love mallard, you can always substitute with a different feather that you do love, or you could just learn to love mallard a little bit more. It's up to you. Either way, the fish probably aren't going to be too picky about it, and they'll eat your fly. All right, so for our third feather here, what we want are fibers that are at least going to get past the beginning of our second feather, and this definitely does that. Cut off the top, trim out a few fibers off of each side. It doesn't have to be super clean, like so. Where the fibers start, we want that just on top of that chenille, like so. Cut out the butt end, tag end of that quill, and this 2 to 3 turns again is all it's going to take, and it really adds a nice mottled effect to the body of this fly, breaks up some of the monotony inside the pattern, and if you look at natural bait fish, that's kind of what they have going on. So there's the final wrap, and I'm trapping there a couple fibers. Turn this over, we'll finish it off on the bottom. There we go. Always brush those fibers out with your fingers if you can get them in there. And using that V that we're going to make right here. This is a little bit crowded, but again, we're going to tie this down so that the fibers sit a little closer to the body, so it's not going to be an issue. And 1 and 2 more wraps inside that V. Great. Cut out our quill. Get rid of so, and now we're back to looking at it on top. Make sure those fibers are all the way around the shank, and you can see where that quill is. We're going to come right on top of it, and this won't lose any movement. It won't hinder anything that the mallard flank is going to offer. All we're doing is setting it up so that there's a platform for our marabou. So let's get into the marabou. Let's start on the bottom again and go back to our white feather. As you can see, like toward the bottom of the quill, we're not going to use these short fibers. We're looking for fibers that are going to touch where the other fibers are tied in there. And as far as how many fibers, it's just a few more than what you used for the back portion, so maybe an inch worth off of the quill. And so this is what I mean. When we tie it in, we want those to overlap that rear portion just a little bit. And this is right where I want it. So on the bottom of the fly, a couple loose wraps, and now we're going to gently, ever so gently, work them up the side. So half of the hook shank is covered. On the bottom, at least, the bottom 50% is our underbody. You can see they want to slip just a little bit, but that's where I want it, and that's where it'll go. Finish tying it down, bring those tag ends back, a couple wraps in front of that, and in the V again, we can get rid of these. Looking pretty good so far. I like where those are sitting. All right. So now, this is not to replicate anything that's realistic, but it makes me happy, and the fish seem to enjoy it. So I don't know if they see this as perhaps the underside of a gill or inside of the gill. I'm going to take just a few of these fluorescent bubblegum UV pink fibers of marabou, and what I'm going to do is go right on top, if you will, of where the white ends on each side. So line it up, match it so that the end of the fibers match where those end. Couple snug wraps right there. We're going to do the same thing on the near side, or my side, if you will. And this is completely a personal taste. I don't see anything wrong with putting some extra triggers into a fly. If we were going to mimic an exact replica, we would not have quite so much olive or pink, either one, in this. But this is supposed to be fun, so that's why we're doing it. Aren't too many rules that you actually have to pay attention to in fly tying. Who's to say what makes a fish eat? Probably they're hungry. All right, and now you can see on the top of this fly, we've left ourselves a perfect little alley for that rest of our olive Marabou, the medium olive, to sit on top there and finish this off. And so again, if you will, look on that quill, roughly an inch worth of, a vertical inch worth of fibers is what I'm going to use. The great thing about Marabou, you can get by with too much or too little either one, because it's just a naturally wavy, flowy material that wants to move, whether it's in the water or whatever, being stripped or drifted, it's gonna move no matter what. Now that I've got it up there, I'm just gonna gently bring it down both sides so that it stays on the top portion, or top 50%, if you will, of that hook shank. And pretty happy with that. You can always use your thumb too and just kind of mash it on the top. Couple more wraps, bring the butts back, couple wraps in front, butts forward, and a couple more wraps in that V. Boom. Let's trim these out. I will get a little bit cleaner on trimming these last few fibers, just because this is it. And now we're gonna head right into making a neat collar, if you will, or thread head, whatever you wanna call it. It's all about cleanliness at this point. Trimming up any loose fibers, getting everything tied down as solidly as we possibly can, because of course we're not going to chase a small fish with this. We're going for something meaty. And now 2 more whip finishes. So whip finish number 1, we're gonna go from the rear portion of this thread collar, 1, move forward, 2, move forward, 3, 4, and 5. First whip finish, and now our second. Same thing, we're just progressively working toward the bead with every wrap, which traps the thread underneath, which makes a knot. And now cut out our thread. Got 1 fiber there, there we go. I don't like that guy, but that's pretty good. So now you can see on your side or the far side of the hook, at the midpoint, we've got our little accent or trigger. And then as we come to this side, it's gonna match up and look exactly the same. And now let's throw on just a little bit of Loon hardhead cement. And it's gonna be tough to not go fish this fly here today. Good thing is it's raining, so that'll probably keep us working instead of fishing. And there, we're almost done. There's nothing else we need to do but make sure we've got that cement all the way around. And that looks really good there. And that is a pretty cool fly. So what we have here is a little rainbow impersonation, if you will, that is going to have a lot of kick coming off of this tail. And the reason I mentioned the kick is because I'm having trouble coming up with a good name for this fly. And I know you guys are all pretty clever. You got some really great names out there in the fly world. So if you want, in the comment section of this video, please feel free to add what you think this should be called. Try to keep it clean a little bit, that'd be great. And we really enjoy tying these flies with you. I hope you guys have as much fun as we do. And if you do enjoy these videos, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and go ahead and click that notification button. And every time that we put something new out, you'll get a little ding and you can come join us. Thanks so much, everybody. Have fun on the water. Bye-bye.